chains of Zarkon. The slave market of Zarkon Prime was loud and cruel. Beings from many alien worlds stood in cages, their eyes filled with fear. Traders shouted prices. Guards laughed. There was no kindness here. Only pain. In one small metal cage sat a little alien girl named Lyra. Her skin was soft blue, her silver eyes full of tears. She looked no older than 10 Earth years. Chains held her hands, and a collar blinked red on her neck. She did not speak. She had not spoken in days. A fat alien trader with sharp yellow teeth pointed at her and shouted, "Strong lungs, good for cleaning or kitchen work. Who will start the bid?" Lyra looked down. She was scared. She had been taken from her home, her parents killed by raiders. Now she was just a number, just a thing to be sold. Crowds gathered. Some laughed, others stared. One alien said, "Too small, not worth much." Another replied, "Small ones, obey better." Then something strange happened. From the back of the crowd, a tall figure stepped forward. He wore a long brown coat and a hood. His boots were old, dirty, but heavy. With each step, the ground seemed to notice. He was a human. The aliens moved aside, whispering, "Human? What's he doing here?" Humans were rare in these parts. Most had left after the war. Some called them monsters. Others called them ghosts. But this human said nothing. He just looked at Lyra. For the first time, Lyra looked up. Her silver eyes met his dark ones. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. But in his eyes, she saw something no one had shown her in a long time: mercy. The trader noticed the human and smiled. "Ah, you want the girl? Cheap deal today. She's quiet and easy to train. Perfect for cleaning, just 300 credits. The human didn't move. The trader looked nervous now. Okay, 250 credits, final price." The human slowly reached into his coat. He pulled out a small metal cube and tossed it at the trader's feet. The trader scanned it. Paid. Deal done. The collar on Lyra's neck beeped and unlocked. Her chains fell to the ground. She didn't move. She was confused. Scared. Why would a human buy her? The trader shouted, "Go with your new master, girl." But the human didn't act like a master. He turned around and started walking away. Then he looked over his shoulder and said in a calm, deep voice, "Come." Lyra stood slowly. Her legs shook. She didn't understand. Was this another trick? Still, something told her to follow. Something inside her small heart whispered, "Trust him." She followed him through the market. No one stopped them. No one dared. The human walked like someone who had nothing to fear. They reached a quiet alley behind the market. The human stopped and looked at her. "You hungry?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly. He gave her a small food bar. She bit it gently, then ate fast. She hadn't tasted real food in days. He knelt beside her. "My name is Reed." She stared at him, unsure. "You don't have to talk," he said. "Not now." Lyra looked at him closely. His hands were rough. His face had a scar near the eye. But there was no anger in his eyes, just silence, and maybe pain. She opened her mouth and in a soft whisper said, "Lyra." Reed gave a slow nod. "All right, Lyra, you're free now. But if you stay with me, it's going to be dangerous." She looked at her feet, then at him again. She nodded. That night they left Zarkon Prime on an old ship. Lyra sat beside Reed, holding a warm blanket he had given her. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know who he really was. But she knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. The stars outside the ship window looked peaceful, but inside Lyra's heart, a storm still lived. She sat in the corner of the small, dark room on Reed's ship, holding the same blanket he had given her. Her thin hands trembled. Her eyes stayed open all night. Sleep was still a stranger. Reed didn't ask questions. He didn't come close. He just worked quietly at the front of the ship, pressing buttons, checking maps, setting a course. He only said one thing that night. "We reach the mining planet in 12 hours. Hide in the cargo bay if we get stopped. Lyra didn't reply, but she listened. She always listened. 12 hours later, the ship landed in the mountains of a backwater mining world called Yarnak V. Dust filled the sky. Machines roared in the distance. Miners in dirty suits moved like ghosts across the rocks. Reed handed Lyra a dusty cap and old clothes. "No one must know what you are," he said. She nodded and pulled the cap over her silver hair. The next few days were hard. Reed had joined as a mechanic for mining drills. Lyra followed him, pretending to be his quiet helper. No one looked. Too close. No one cared. Everyone here was broken somehow. But what made Yarnak V cruel wasn't just the labor. It was the people. One of them was Gex, a tall alien miner with red scales and a twisted smile. He liked to scare the weak, and Lyra looked weak. One evening, Gex walked close to her when Reed was busy fixing a power cell. "You lost little bug," Gex whispered. He grabbed her arm. "Maybe I should show you how things work here." Lyra froze. Her heart raced. Her voice refused to come out, but before Gex could take another step, Reed grabbed his wrist. Hard. So hard, Gex's grin faded in pain. "She's with me," Reed said quietly. Gex laughed nervously. "Didn't mean anything by it. Just a joke." Reed didn't blink. He squeezed harder. Gex cried out, then pulled away. Reed let go and said just one word. "Walk." Gex walked. Lyra looked at Reed shocked. He didn't even raise his voice. But something in the way he stood made everyone around stay back. That night, Lyra sat beside a small heater in the broken worker shack they shared. She stared at the floor. Reed checked, his tools in silence. Then Lyra spoke, barely a whisper. "Why? Do you help me?" Reed looked up. His voice was quiet, but firm. "Because someone didn't help when they should have. A long time ago." Lyra waited. But he said no more. She didn't need more. She could feel the truth in his voice. The next day, Lyra tried to help him more. She passed him tools. She studied the engines. Reed noticed. "You learn fast," he said. That night, as cold winds shook the shack, Lyra spoke again. "My parents, they died in a raid." Reed said nothing at first. Then he replied, "Mine too. Different reason, same feeling." They sat, in silence, two souls broken by the galaxy, slowly finding safety in each other. But safety doesn't last long on Yarnak V. One afternoon, a loud alarm rang through the camp. A slave had tried to escape. Guards chased him down. The man tripped and a laser blast hit him in the back, dead. Lyra saw it happen. She couldn't breathe. She felt her past crashing down again. That night she cried silently under her blanket. Reed heard her, but he didn't try to stop her tears. Instead, he placed a warm cup beside her bed. "I won't let them hurt you," he said. Not again. For the first time, she believed it. He was more than just her protector. He was her shield. The sun on Yarnak V never truly rose. It just burned through clouds of ash and smoke for a few hours, then disappeared behind black mountains again. In the dark corners of the mining camp, whispers had started. Someone had stolen a guard's keycard. Someone was planning to run, but no one knew who. No one dared guess. Lyra did, because that someone was Reed. Reed didn't talk about it directly, but Lyra had learned to read his actions. He was studying maps on his wrist screen at night. He counted guard shifts with his eyes when they passed. He fixed a broken mining drone, then quietly kept its battery. He was preparing. One evening, as they sat by their small heater, Lyra whispered, "You're going to escape, aren't you?" Reed didn't answer right away. Then he said softly, "I'm not going alone." Lyra's heart jumped. "Me?" Reed looked at her. "I didn't come here for a job, Lyra. I came for you." She gasped. He continued, "I've freed others before, but you remind me that hope still exists." Lyra blinked, confused. "But how?" "The guards, the fences." Reed showed her a device made of wires, glowing softly. This is a jammer. For 90 seconds, it shuts down all trackers, sensors, and gates. She stared at it. Only 90 seconds? That's all we'll get, Reed said. There's a storm coming tomorrow. Dust will blind the drones. The wind will cover our tracks. Lyra's hands shook. I'm scared. Reed placed a hand on her shoulder. So am I, but we don't have to stay in chains forever. The next morning, the skies grew orange with dust. Alarms sounded as the winds picked up. Visibility dropped fast. The guards rushed to secure the outer gates. It was time. Reed whispered, "Stay close, don't stop no matter what you hear." Lyra nodded. Her chest was tight with fear, but her feet were ready. They crept out of the worker shack and moved along, the shadows of broken walls. Other workers stayed hidden, afraid of the storm. It was the perfect cover. Reed reached the gate and pulled out the jammer. He pressed a button. A low hum started. The red lights on the gate blinked once, then turned black. "Go," Reed said. They ran, but halfway through the yard, a guard shouted behind them, "Hey, stop them!" A shot fired. Dirt exploded near Lyra's feet. Reed turned, pulled a small pulse blaster from his coat, and fired back. One shot. The guard dropped, stunned. More voices, more footsteps. The jammer's 90 seconds were almost up. Reed grabbed Lyra's hand. Almost there. They reached the outer fence. The power was down. They slipped through a gap Reed had cut earlier. The wind howled like a beast, shaking everything. And then, the jammer died. The red lights blinked on. Alarms screamed. Sirens echoed. But it was too late. Reed and Lyra were gone. They ran through dust and darkness for hours. Lyra coughed. Her legs hurt, but she didn't stop. They finally reached a hidden cave, deep in the mountain. Inside was a small, covered vehicle. A buried sky bike Reed had hidden long ago. Lyra stared at it. You planned everything." Reed smiled for the first time. Freedom takes planning. He helped her onto the bike, then climbed behind her. With a roar, they took off, flying through the storm. The guards searched for them all night. They never found them. Inside the storm, above the clouds, Lyra held tight to Reed and whispered, "What now?" Reed looked ahead at the stars. "Now, we find a place where no one owns anyone. Where you're just Lyra." And for the first time in her life, that name felt real. A blood-red poster blinked across 1,000 screens. Wanted, human fugitive, and stolen asset reward. 50,000 credits. Dead or alive across the galaxy, bounty hunters sharpened their knives. Criminal gangs pulled out old maps. And corrupt officers cleaned their guns, all for one man. Reed, and one little girl with silver eyes. Lyra. The mining company was furious. Not because Lyra escaped, but because she had value. Her blood carried rare genetic traits. To them, she wasn't a girl. She was a product. Now she was missing. And Reed had taken her. They hid in the shadows of dead planets. They stayed away from trade routes. Reed used fake names, rerouted signals, hacked old codes. But the hunters kept coming. In one station, a cloaked figure followed them through the market. Reed noticed too late. The man pulled a blade. "That's a fine price on your head, human." Reed pushed Lyra behind a crate and drew his blaster. Bang. The hunter dropped, but others were watching. They ran. Days passed, then weeks. Lyra learned how to change IDs, how to hide her face, how to speak just enough to get by. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning, but the chase didn't stop. On a gas station moon called Drexel 3, they almost got caught. Lyra had gone alone to find food. When she returned, she found Reed handcuffed and on his knees. 3 bounty hunters stood over him, laughing. One of them sneered, "We'll sell the girl first, then feed him to the dogs." Lyra shook. She wanted to run, but then she remembered what Reed told her. Be brave even when it hurts. She picked up a rock, then another. She ran across the dusty lot and threw it at the power grid. Boom, the lights died. Sparks flew. Chaos exploded. Reed took his chance. In one smooth motion, he slammed his shoulder into the nearest hunter, stole his weapon, and took the rest down. By the time the lights came back, only Lyra and Reed stood, breathing, alive. That night they hid in an old cargo ship. Reed's arm was bleeding. Lyra cleaned the wound carefully. "You did good," he said softly. "You taught me," she whispered. Reed looked at her and said, "You're more than they ever saw in you." Lyra smiled faintly. "And you're more than they think of humans." But danger wasn't the only thing following them. Rumors were spreading. On a refugee station, a woman said, "I heard a human freed a slave child." In a spaceport, a trader said, "That girl, she looked like royalty." In a bar, a soldier said, "Reed, the one who left the war after what he saw." Stories grew, and so did the danger. One night, while resting on a drifting medical station, Lyra asked the question that haunted her. "Why me, Reed? Why risk your life?" "For me." Reed sat silent for a moment. Then he spoke. "Because once I watched people suffer and did nothing. I swore never again." He paused, then looked at her. "You reminded me of someone I lost. A little sister. She trusted me, but I was too late to save her." Lyra reached for his hand. "You saved me." But far away, in the dark hall of a powerful corporation, a voice growled, "Find them. Kill the human. Bring the girl back, alive." And so the hunt would continue across space, through fire, and into the unknown. The starship Midnight Whisper floated above a dying moon, its engines silent, cloaked from scanners. Inside the small living quarters, Lyra sat quietly, tracing a broken toy she had found in a refugee camp. Reed was asleep nearby, his chest slowly, rising and falling. For the first time in days, they were safe. Or so they thought. Earlier that day, Reed had taken a risk. He had reached out to someone from his past, an alien smuggler named Nira Voss. She had once saved his life in a war zone. She owed him, or so he believed. Nira arrived in a silver ship called the Needle. She was tall, with dark purple skin and gold tattoos. Her voice was smooth like oil and her eyes smiled too easily. When she saw Reed, she smirked. "Still rescuing strays, I see." Reed replied, "This one's not a stray. She's family." Lyra didn't like her. Something felt wrong. Nira's eyes lingered too long. Her laugh was too fake. But she said she could smuggle them to a protected world. A place with no trackers, no hunters, no slavery. Reed agreed. That night, as Lyra pretended to sleep in her corner, she heard whispers outside the ship. Nira's voice. "Double the bounty if I bring them in alive? Fine, I'll give you the human too. Dead or breathing doesn't matter to me." Lyra froze. Her breath caught. Her heart pounded. Betrayal. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed to Reed. She shook him gently. He opened one eye and sat up fast when he saw her face. "They're coming," she whispered. She lied. Reed didn't ask questions. He grabbed his blaster and motioned for silence. The betrayal came fast. Nira entered the ship with two armed mercenaries, smiling like nothing was wrong. "I brought help," she said, "to carry supplies." Reed raised his weapon. "Liar!" The mercenaries moved to attack. Reed shot first. Bang, bang. One fell. Lyra threw a metal cup at the other's head, just as Reed tackled him to the floor. A sharp blast fired. Smoke filled the air. Nira ran. They chased her through the docking bay. Lyra's heart raced. Reed's leg was bleeding. Nira jumped into her ship. The door began to close, but before it shut, Lyra dove forward and hit the lock panel with a wrench. Sparks flew. The ship's doors jammed. Reed limped forward and pulled Nira out of the cockpit. She spat blood. "You should have stayed hidden, Reed. You'll never keep her safe." Reed pointed his weapon at her. Lyra stepped in front of him. "No," she said softly. "She's not worth it." He lowered the gun. They left Nira tied up for the authorities. They flew away in midnight whisper. Lyra asked, "How do you know who to trust?" Reed stared into space. "I don't. I just know who never deserves another chance." Lyra leaned against his arm. "I'm glad you gave me one." But their ship was damaged. The fuel was low, and the bounty on their heads had now doubled. Worse, someone new had joined the hunt. An elite bounty tracker known only by one name, Corin. He had never failed to catch his target, and he was already on their trail. The ship Midnight Whisper trembled. In the cold black of space, a fuel leak hissed softly. The lights flickered, and Reed's blood was still warm on the floor. Lyra held her breath, pressing a cloth on his side where the plasma bolt had hit. "Stay with me," she whispered, voice shaking. Reed opened his eyes barely. "Lyra, go. Don't wait." "No," she said. "I'm not leaving you. Never." It all started hours earlier. They had docked on a small repair station near a dead asteroid belt, just for parts and rest. The place looked abandoned, but it wasn't. Corin had already found them. He didn't shout. He didn't chase. He walked, in like a shadow, calm and slow. A long black coat, red cyber eyes, and a face without fear. Everyone knew him. He shot Reed in the side before Lyra even saw him coming. But Reed still managed to throw an EMP mine and blast the hallway with static. Corin didn't fall, but he stumbled, and that gave them time to escape. Now, hours later, Reed was dying and their ship couldn't fly far. Lyra looked out at the belt of broken ships around them, ruins from an old space battle, empty, forgotten. Dangerous, she had an idea, a crazy one. She turned to Reed. "I'll be back, don't move." He tried to speak but passed out. Wearing a pressure suit too big for her, Lyra jumped into the escape pod and piloted it into the debris field. Her hands shook. Her teeth bit her lip. But her mind was clear. She searched ruined ships for power, cores, old engines, anything. She found an old war cruiser split in half floating silently. Inside, a dead crew, a cracked AI, and one glowing battery. She dragged it back with cables struggling through space. Alarms rang in her suit. Oxygen low. Still, she didn't stop. Back on Midnight Whisper, she connected the power and got the engines barely running. She injected a stim pack into Reed's arm and guided the ship into an orbit around a frozen moon, out of scanner range. Then she collapsed beside him. Cold, exhausted, crying, but safe. Reed woke up 2 days later, weak but alive. He blinked, then looked at her with tired eyes. "You saved us," Lyra smiled. "You told me once, freedom has a cost. This is mine." He reached out, squeezed her hand gently. "I'm proud of you." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. For a moment, the galaxy outside was silent. But far away, Corin stood before a council of rich masters. One showed him a picture of Lyra. "Bring her back," they said. "No more mistakes." Corin nodded once, then turned and walked into the dark. The hall of the Galactic Justice Council was filled with aliens of every kind. Kings, warlords, ambassadors, and judges in robes of fireglass, and in the center of them all, Lyra stood alone. She was no longer just the little blue girl in chains. Her silver eyes were steady. Her voice, silent for years, was now ready to break the galaxy open. The trial was not about her, not at first. Reed had been caught. Corin had brought him in, half dead, tied in chains, just like Lyra once was. He was accused of theft, of murder, of rebellion. But when the council announced the charges, Lyra stepped forward. "I want to speak." The room went silent. A judge laughed. "You are not a citizen of this court." But Lyra didn't step back. She pressed a small device. A hologram appeared. Images of slave markets, of children in chains, of mining camps, of what Reed had saved her from. And then she said just one sentence. "I am living proof that this human is no criminal." The judges were silent. So Lyra told them everything. How her parents were killed, how she was sold, how Reed found her, not to use her, not to sell her, but to save her. She told them how he bled for her, ran for her, taught her to fight, to think, to speak. She looked into the eyes of the same leaders who allowed slavery to spread like poison and said, "You fear him because he didn't bow. But I call him my father, and he gave me back my name." The room trembled, the ambassadors whispered, the press started recording. The galaxy was watching. One of the judges, an old alien with crystal skin, stood and asked, "Child, what do you want from this court?" Lyra looked at Reed, weak but watching her from the cage. She turned back and said, "I want his chains, broken, and every slave's name remembered." For a long moment nothing happened. Then, the council made its decision. The chains were removed. Reed was free. Lyra was declared a citizen, not a product. And across the stars the message spread: a human had saved a slave, and the slave had saved the truth. Weeks later, Lyra and Reed walked through the green fields of a peaceful colony world. Children ran, the sun was warm, and no one wore collars. Reed sat under a tree looking up at the sky. "You did it," he said softly. Lyra smiled. "We did." He nodded. "What will you do now?" She looked toward the horizon. "I want to find others, like me. Help them. Free them. Like you freed me." Reed chuckled. "Looks like I've created a troublemaker." Lyra laughed. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out the small toy from long ago, the one she found in the refugee camp. It was broken then, but now, she had fixed it, just like herself. And in the distance, on every screen, her name became known, not as a victim, not as a slave, but as the girl who spoke and changed everything.